What if I told you there was a world champion boxer who won 87 straight fights without ever mastering the most basic punch in the sport? From his relentless body attacks to his suffocating pressure that made legends crumble, Julio César Chávez was undoubtedly one of the greatest fighters to ever lace up gloves, and his best rounds are, honestly, some of the most brutal displays of warfare ever captured on film. But how did this stocky Mexican develop a style so unique that it allowed him to reign as champion for over a decade? And why did he deliberately choose to fight in the most dangerous, painful way possible when a simple jab could have made things so much easier? To find out, we need to go back to 1980. Culiacán, Sinaloa, Mexico. A city known more for its cartel violence than its boxing champions. But in the gym of Rodolfo El Zurdo Mendoza, a 17-year-old kid with a square frame and a serious face was about to change that narrative forever. Julio César Chávez, one of 10 children born into crushing poverty, had already decided boxing wasn't just a sport, it was survival. While other teenagers were in school, Julio was working odd jobs to help feed his family. And when he wasn't working, he was in the gym. But there was a problem. His jab was terrible, like genuinely awful. Coaches tried to fix it. They drilled him on the fundamentals. They showed him film of Muhammad Ali, of Sugar Ray Robinson, of all the greats who built their entire style around that single punch. But Julio's jab was slow, telegraphed, and lacked the snap that makes the punch effective. For most fighters, this would be a death sentence. The jab is called the most important punch in boxing for a reason. It sets up everything else, controls distance, and keeps opponents at bay. But Julio's trainer, Rodolfo Mendoza, saw something others didn't. Instead of forcing the kid to be something he wasn't, Mendoza asked a simple question. If you can't keep them at distance, what if you never let them have distance at all? And with that question, a legend was born. On February 5, 1980, Julio César Chávez stepped into the ring for his first amateur bout. His opponent was a taller fighter with a textbook jab, exactly the kind of fighter who should have given Julio nightmares. The bell rang, and what happened next shocked everyone in attendance. Julio didn't try to out-jab him. He didn't try to box. Instead, he walked through every punch like it was a light breeze, got inside, and started digging hooks into the body. Left hook to the liver, right hook to the ribs, left hook again. The opponent tried to clinch, tried to create space, but Julio was like a pit bull. Once he got close, there was no escape. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Julio had discovered something profound. While everyone else was trying to keep distance, he would eliminate it entirely. Where others saw the jab as essential, he saw it as optional. His weapons would be different. Body shots, hooks, uppercuts, and most importantly, pressure that never, ever stopped. By the time Julio turned professional on February 5, 1980, his 18th birthday, he had refined his unconventional style. No jab? No problem. He would slip punches instead of blocking them from distance. He would cut off the ring with footwork. He would dig to the body until opponents dropped their hands, then come upstairs with hooks. His first professional fight lasted 6 rounds. Julio won by decision, but more importantly, he learned something crucial. His style worked even better against pros. Why? Because professional fighters are trained to expect jabs. They're taught to counter them, to time them, to use them as reference points. When facing someone who doesn't jab, their entire defensive framework collapses. Imagine preparing for an opponent who fights right-handed, only to discover he's a southpaw. That's what fighting Julio was like. Except the adjustment wasn't about stance, it was about distance management and timing. Everything professional fighters knew about rhythm went out the window. Over the next 3 years, Julio fought 26 times. He won all 26. 21 of those wins came by knockout. But it wasn't just the victories that caught attention. It was how he won. Round after round, Julio would walk forward, eat jabs that would have stopped other fighters, and break his opponent's will with relentless bodywork. But the boxing world wasn't convinced. Sure, he was winning, but against who? Regional fighters? Journeymen? Nobody real. The critics said the same thing. Wait until he fights a real champion. Wait until he faces someone who can jab, move, and keep him at distance. Then we'll see if this no-jab style actually works. On September 13, 1984, Julio would get his chance to prove them all wrong. The Inglewood Forum, California. Julio César Chávez, 37-0, steps into the ring to challenge Mario Azabache Martinez for the WBC Super Featherweight Championship. Martinez was no joke, a slick boxer with excellent footwork and a sharp jab. On paper, he was exactly the kind of fighter who should expose Julio's weakness. The opening bell rang, and Martinez immediately went to work with his jab, snapping Julio's head back, keeping him at range. The announcers nodded approvingly. But then, something happened. Julio ate the jabs, not blocked them, not slipped them, ate them. He walked through them like they were raindrops, his head barely moving, his eyes locked on Martinez like a predator stalking prey. Martinez's hands began to drop. He tried to circle away, but Julio's footwork, honed over hundreds of hours in the gym, cut off every escape route. By the 8th round, Martinez was grimacing with every breath. Those body shots had broken his will. In the 8th round, Julio landed a perfectly placed left hook to the liver.
La cortada de Azabache es en la boca o en el labio. Hay tanta sangre que no se alcanza a ver. Y ahí se lleva una sólida derecha y luego derecha e izquierda. Pero Chávez, a finales del round anterior, estaba cometiendo el error de engolosinarse y se llevó duros golpes de Azabache. Deben haberle advertido contra eso en su esquina en el descanso. Dramatic fight. Mario Martinez's face is y la cortada, por más espectacular que es, provoca mucha sangre. No es peligrosa. La de la boca, la de la ceja tal vez. Ahí está Azabache conectando, combinación.
At 22 years old, Julio César Chávez was a world champion, and he did it without throwing more than a handful of jabs the entire fight. But Julio wasn't satisfied. Being champion was one thing, staying champion was another. So he went back to the gym with Rodolfo Mendoza and refined his style even further. They worked on footwork, specifically cutting off the ring. See, without a jab to control distance, Julio needed to be a master at angles. He studied tape of Roberto Duran, another body-punching legend, and Joe Frazier, who also struggled with his jab but became heavyweight champion through sheer pressure. "Watch Frazier," Mendoza told him. He couldn't jab for shit, but nobody could escape his left hook because his feet were always in position. That's what you need. They worked on head movement, the Mexican style of defense. Instead of using a long jab to keep opponents away, Julio would slip punches by inches, making opponents miss, then counter with devastating combinations to the body. They worked on conditioning, running, sparring, bag work, until Julio could maintain his pressure for 12 full rounds without slowing down. Because that was the key. Other fighters might survive 3 rounds of Julio's pressure, maybe even 6, but nobody could survive 12. And most importantly, they worked on the body attack. Julio studied anatomy. He knew exactly where the liver sat, where the solar plexus was, how to aim just below the ribs to make breathing impossible. His body shots weren't just hard, they were precise. On August 3, 1985, Julio defended his title against Dwight Pratchett. He won by knockout in round 3. Then came Ruben Castillo, knockout in round 6. Then Roger Mayweather, the uncle of Floyd Mayweather Jr., knockout in round 2 with a body shot so brutal that Roger later said, "It felt like my insides exploded."
A ti no te voy a tener compasión. A ti no te voy a tener nada de compasión. A ti sí te voy a arrancar la cabeza.
fight after fight, knockout after knockout, Julio was building something unprecedented, a win streak that would eventually reach 87 consecutive victories without a single loss. And in every single fight, the pattern was the same. Opponents would try to jab, try to keep distance, and Julio would simply walk through it, get inside, and destroy the body. Boxing analysts started calling him the Mexican assassin. Promoters loved him because his fights were guaranteed violence. Fans worshipped him because he fought like a man possessed. And opponents feared him because they knew, no matter how good their jab was, no matter how much they prepared, once Julio got inside, it was only a matter of time. But there was one question nobody could answer. What happens when Julio faces someone who doesn't just have a good jab, but a great one? Someone with the footwork and ring IQ to keep him at distance for 12 full rounds. On November 21st, 1987, Julio would face exactly that kind of fighter. Madison Square Garden, New York City. Julio César Chávez, now 65-0, was moving up to the lightweight division to challenge Edwin Chapo Rosario for the WBA lightweight championship. Rosario was considered one of the most talented fighters in the world, a southpaw with a laser jab, fast hands, and legitimate knockout power. This was supposed to be the fight that exposed Julio's flaw. The commentators predicted it. The odds makers doubted it. Even some of Julio's own fans worried that maybe, finally, he had met his match. The first round started exactly as expected.
Takes a backward step. Rosario, he's like a little magician there. I just don't like him there in the corner, or against the ropes, rather.
Rosario's jab was quick, sharp, and accurate. He circled to his right, away from Julio's power hand, using angles and footwork. For 3 minutes, Rosario executed a perfect game plan, and Julio barely landed anything significant. The analysts said, "When you have the discipline to stick behind your jab and move, Chávez can't solve it." But they forgot something important. Julio wasn't trying to win rounds. He was trying to break spirits.
And still Rosario has his back to the ropes, and he has most of the first round. You notice little short shots. As advertised. Body shots.
By the fourth round, the game plan started to crack. Rosario's legs weren't as fresh. His jab wasn't as crisp. Why? Because for 3 rounds, Julio had been walking forward, eating jabs, cutting off the ring inch by inch, and every time Rosario planted his feet to throw combinations, Julio would dig hooks into his ribs.
Very good concentration. There, that's it. Right off the ropes with a good shot. Watch the back. Big right hand by Chávez. Now what Chávez is doing is actually the same principle of chopping the tree down. 3-punch combination. One of them was low, but another right hand by Chávez. Combination again. This is another dominant round for Chávez so far.
In the 6th round, Julio hurt Rosario with a left hook to the body. You could see it on Rosario's face, the pain, the realization that this pressure wasn't going to stop. By the 8th round, Rosario was visibly tired, his hands dropping, his movement slowing.
That hurt Rosario. It also cut him, and he's in a world of trouble.
And then, in the 11th round, Julio unleashed hell. A combination. Left hook to the body, right hook to the body, left hook to the head. Rosario stumbled backward. Julio didn't give him space to recover. Another left hook to the body and Rosario's knees buckled. The referee jumped in and stopped it. Julio César Chávez, the man who couldn't jab, had just dismantled one of the best jabbers in boxing. But if the Rosario fight proved Julio could beat a great jabber, the Meldrick Taylor fight would prove something else entirely. That Julio's style wasn't just effective, it was terrifying. March 17, 1990, Las Vegas, Nevada. Julio César Chávez, 68-0, faced Meldrick Taylor, the 1984 Olympic gold medalist, in a unification bout. Taylor was everything Julio wasn't: fast, mobile, with a textbook jab and slick boxing skills. At 26 years old, he was in his absolute prime. For 11 rounds, Taylor put on a boxing clinic. His jab was snapping Julio's head back. His footwork was keeping him out of danger. His hand speed was making Julio miss. But they forgot something. Julio never stopped coming forward. For 11 rounds, he had been eating jabs, cutting off the ring, and digging to the body every time Taylor planted his feet. And slowly, quietly, those body shots were adding up. 12 seconds from victory, and Meldrick Taylor lost because he couldn't survive Julio's relentless pressure. It remains one of the most controversial stoppages in boxing history, but it proves something undeniable. Julio's style broke fighters physically and mentally. Even when they were winning, they were losing, because the pressure never stopped. By the way, if you're enjoying this story and want more deep dives into fighters who broke the mold, make sure you're subscribed, because trust me, we're just getting started. For 3 more years, Julio continued his reign of terror. He moved up to the welterweight division. He unified more titles. He defended his championships 12 times. His record stood at 87-0 with 75 knockouts. It was one of the greatest achievements in boxing history. But on September 10, 1993, in the Alamodome in San Antonio, Texas, reality finally caught up. Julio faced Pernell "Sweet Pea" Whitaker, one of the most defensively gifted fighters who ever lived. Whitaker had everything Julio struggled with: a lightning-fast jab, incredible footwork, and the ring IQ to never let Julio get inside. For 12 rounds, Whitaker circled, jabbed, and moved. And for 12 rounds, Julio chased, pressured, and tried to land his body shots. When the final bell rang, the judges scored it a controversial draw. But everyone watching knew the truth. Julio had lost. Not because his style didn't work anymore, but because after 87 straight fights, his body was finally breaking down. At 31 years old, with over a decade of wars in the ring, the pressure fighter who never stopped coming forward was finally slowing down. "Maybe I needed a jab after all," Julio joked after the fight. But then he got serious. "No, my style got me here. My style made me champion for 10 years. I have no regrets."
115, a draw. The decision is a majority decision draw.
A draw, and you can see the reaction of Sweet Pea Whitaker. He can't
The years after Whitaker were harder. Julio lost to Frankie Randall, avenged it, then struggled against fighters he would have destroyed in his prime. His body, punished by years of walking through punches, was breaking down. His legendary chin started to crack. His legendary conditioning started to fade. On June 7, 1996, Oscar de la Hoya, boxing's new golden boy, stopped Julio in the 4th round. It was painful to watch. The warrior who had never backed down was being beaten up by a younger, faster fighter. But even in defeat, Julio showed his heart. He didn't quit. The referee had to stop it because Julio would never stop coming forward, even when he had nothing left. He tried to come back multiple times. He won some fights against lesser opponents, but the magic was gone. In 2005, at the age of 43, Julio César Chávez finally retired with a record of 107-6-2 with 86 knockouts. So here's the question I want you to think about. Does Julio César Chávez belong in the conversation of the greatest fighters of all time? Some people say no. They point to his lack of a jab, his one-dimensional style, his losses at the end of his career. They say he was a great pressure fighter, but not a complete boxer. But here's what they forget. Julio didn't need to be a complete boxer. He mastered his style to such a degree that it didn't matter what you brought to the ring. If you couldn't handle 12 rounds of suffocating pressure and brutal body shots, you were going to lose. Think about it. 87 consecutive victories. 10 years as a world champion. Victories over Roger Mayweather, Edwin Rosario, Héctor Camacho, Greg Haugen, and countless others. He filled stadiums in Mexico like a rock star. His fights with Meldrick Taylor and Pernell Whitaker are studied in boxing gyms to this day. "You don't need every tool in the toolbox," said Freddie Roach, one of the greatest trainers in boxing history. "You just need to master the tools you have." Julio mastered pressure. He mastered body punching. He mastered breaking wills. That made him great. But here's what nobody talks about when they discuss Julio's style. It wasn't just about not having a jab. It was about understanding something deeper about fighting. See, most boxers, especially modern ones, are taught to minimize damage. Use the jab to keep distance. Move to avoid getting hit. Conserve energy. It's smart, it's tactical, it's safe. But Julio understood that sometimes the most effective strategy is the most painful one. By walking through jabs, by taking 2 punches to land one, by putting himself in danger, he created something his opponents couldn't handle: inevitability. When you fought Julio, you knew he was coming. You knew that no matter how many jabs you landed, no matter how much you moved, he would eventually get inside. And once he got inside, those body shots were coming. That psychological pressure was, in many ways, more devastating than the physical one. Fighting Julio was like drowning, said one of his opponents years later. You could win every exchange, land every jab, but you could feel yourself getting tired while he stayed the same. It was terrifying. That's the secret nobody talks about. Julio's style worked not despite lacking a jab, but because he committed fully to a different philosophy. He didn't try to be Muhammad Ali. He didn't try to be Sugar Ray Leonard. He was Julio César Chávez, and he fought his way. Let's go back to the question we started with. How did a boxer who couldn't jab dominate the ring for over a decade? The answer is simpler than you think. He turned his weakness into a strength. Without a jab, Julio had to become the greatest pressure fighter of his generation. He had to develop world-class footwork to cut off the ring. He had to master body punching to a degree few fighters ever achieve. He had to develop an inhuman pain tolerance and conditioning because his style demanded it. If Julio had a great jab, maybe he would have become just another good boxer. But because he didn't, he became a legend. That's the lesson. Your limitations can define you, or they can refine you. Julio chose to be refined by his. Today, when young fighters watch tape of Julio César Chávez, they see something that looks almost reckless. Walking forward into punches, eating jabs like they're nothing, taking risks no modern trainer would ever allow. But what they're really seeing is a fighter who understood something profound. Boxing isn't just about technique, it's about will. It's about making your opponent break before you do. It's about finding your own path to victory, even if that path looks nothing like anyone else's. Julio César Chávez didn't need a jab to dominate the ring. He needed heart. He needed pressure. He needed body shots that made legends quit. And for 87 straight fights, that was more than enough. So, leave a comment below. Do you think Julio César Chávez belongs in the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters of all time? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts because this one always sparks debate. And speaking of unconventional fighters who defied the textbook, did you know there was a heavyweight champion who fought with his hands down, chin exposed, and still couldn't be knocked out? George Foreman's second career is one of the most insane comeback stories in sports history. To learn about how a 45-year-old man knocked out fighters half his age, click the video on your screen right now, and that's the bell. Thanks for watching.